reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. In a few moments, we'll be going live to the Commons for Prime Minister's Questions. I have a fantastic panel of politicians to discuss what's coming up and to give their verdict afterwards. And I want to hear from you. Give me your political briefing and verdict on Prime Minister's Questions. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So yes, PMQs starting in just a few minutes. Of course, we'll take you there live. But first, let's talk to my fantastic panel. Derek Thomas, Conservative MP for West Cornwall and the Scilly Isles, and Baroness Jenny Chapman, Shadow Minister at the Cabinet Office. Welcome to you both. Nice to see you. So levelling up is the big subject today. The government are unveiling their plans to reduce the inequality between the regions in our country. The criticisms are that there's no new money. Council budgets have been slashed since 2010. The Labour Party states a load of rehashed announcements and slogans. Why are they wrong, Derek?
Well, I think if we thought that councils were the answer to giving everybody the opportunities they need, then maybe I'd agree with that. But actually, what this levelling up hopefully must do and needs to do for Cornwall and for other parts of the country is actually create the opportunities that other people enjoy elsewhere. And so in Cornwall, the first thing I said in my maiden speech in 2015, the same as Sir John Knott said in 1966, was the average wage in Cornwall was about a third less of the average wage of anyone working across England. So we need to address that, and levelling up gives us the best opportunity to do that. And so it is about really offering the skills, the opportunity and the aspiration that people need to be able to stay where they grew up and live and grow and contribute to where they grew up, which is really key for Cornwall.
And Jenny, they have a levelling up secretary, a levelling up white paper.
Yep.
More than Labour ever did.
They've got a big slogan, they've got a 400-page document. What they haven't got is any new ideas, any resources or any concrete plan. They don't say how they're going to achieve all of this. And as someone who's lived in Darlington for 41 years, bringing my kids up there, I've seen exactly what's happened since 2010. I want the skills, I want the aspiration, I want the ambition. But, you know, the Labour Party didn't call it levelling up and have a slogan. We just called it government. You've got to invest in every area of your country if you want to succeed as a nation. This government's failed to do it. They've taken money not just out of councils, but out of policing, out of health, out of schools, out of just about everything in terms of public services locally. It shows. And damn right they need to put this right. Unfortunately, what we've seen today isn't going to go anywhere near enough.
I mean, Derek, Jenny's point is that libraries have closed, police stations have closed, children's centres have closed.
Well,
is that a source of regret for you or any of those things?
Well, if you came to my constituency, you would see at the moment about £100 million of investment, a lot even before the announcement today, targeted investment to really be able to lift up the area and to provide those opportunities. Libraries work in very different ways, so our libraries are still open, but they have a very different offer to as they did in the past. It isn't just about books now; it's about skills and opportunities and access to IT, for example. But actually, I think that if you look at the kind of money that is coming into, I've got 2 towns funds, I've got High Street fund deals, I've got £48 million going to just the link between the Isles of Scilly, which is the Isles of Scilly, not the Scilly Isles. You'll get in terrible trouble on the Isles of Scilly if you call them the Scilly Isles.
I
made that mistake. So the Isles of Scilly is that link there. So actually, it's about targeted money that really helps sort out the problem. And where we probably differ with Labour is exactly what you just heard. It's not government, because actually government don't fix problems. They should enable things to happen and provide opportunity.
Well, I agree with that.
That's absolutely where we are.
I do agree that it's about government being an enabling partner for local areas, and the issues that are about devolving as far as you possibly can to get better decision making. Absolutely agree with that. But what we're seeing is resources being allocated, limited as they are, but being allocated not according to need. So somewhere like Mid-Bedfordshire is doing very, very well out of these sort of town funds, levelling up funds, little pots of cash, because they're being asked to bid and decisions are being made actually in Whitehall a very long way from these communities. And what we want to see is decision-making being done according to need, as it should be, so that areas like mine in the northeast do better, because actually look at what's happening in terms of women's life expectancy, in terms of progress with children at school, about attainment preschool. So when kids start school, they're starting off actually further behind than they used to. All of these things need urgent but long-term plans to address. And they're not going to do that with these little pots of cash that councils have to bid for, because it just, you're hiding what the real fundamental problems are, and you're never going to level up unless you address those.
But just talking about those areas and singling out those areas which the Conservatives won for the first time, do you feel that those voters that voted Conservative for the first time in 2019, do you feel like they're running back to Labour?
No, I don't feel that they are, actually. I think they're disgusted with what they've seen from the Tory party. They are very angry about it. I think they're looking at the Labour Party and they're asking themselves, is this the Labour Party that we can trust? They haven't forgotten the Labour Party that we presented to them in 2019, which they rejected, but they know that we're changing and they're watching and they're giving us a chance. Now, for me, at this stage, 2 years in, that's enough. You can't expect to be able to turn that round super quick. But we're on a journey, and I think we need to work with those communities, take them with us, keep talking, build that respect and that trust. And that's what the Labour Party needs to do, and that is what it's doing.
Tariq, let's talk about what's happening in your party at the moment. Tobias Ellwood, the senior Conservative MP, is the latest Conservative MP to say that they are going to submit a letter calling for a leadership contest, essentially saying that they have no confidence in the Prime Minister. I'll put you his quote to him. "This is all going one way and will invariably slide towards a very ugly place." Do you agree? Tobias Ellwood thinks the Prime Minister, it's over. The question is when, not if. Is he wrong about that, in your view?
Well, I would probably doubt that Boris will lead us into the next election. But Tobias has taken a curious position on this, because in recent weeks, he's one of the most vocal MPs around the situation in Ukraine, talking about it being inevitable that we're going to have a conflict there. And so actually, if you really believe that, if you really believe in the severity of the situation along the Ukraine border and elsewhere in that part of the world, are you then going to pitch the government into 3 months of even more instability, where actually everything stops? I mean, the minute you trigger a leadership election, everything stops. All the work that we're engaged in now, and not just in Ukraine, but in levelling up and getting the vaccine out, in supporting health and social care integration, that just comes to an immediate halt. And there's no guarantee that it actually gets picked up by whoever takes over. And to be honest with you, I think Boris would win anyway, so it's just an unnecessary distraction from the things that really matter. The shift is moving away from Boris as being a problem, but actually the government have got so many things on their plate. Let's get on with those things and worry about leadership later on.
You said something very interesting there. You said that you didn't think Boris Johnson would lead you into the next election.
No, I don't. I don't think he will.
So that backs up Tobias's point that it's all going one way. So why not just get it over and done with if it's going to happen anyway? Because
of the challenges we're facing right now. And to be honest with you, it's not just Boris trying to sort these problems out. It's the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary, all these government that's working together. Lots of expertise, lots of intelligence, a critical situation, which all comes unstuck the minute you change the leader. And actually, I think Boris, he's a frustrating individual. I didn't support him in leadership because I just didn't know what I'd be defending every day, and I have been defending everyday stuff. But he is definitely competent. He definitely has the ability to get on top of a particular issue and drive it, as he did with the vaccine, as he is now with Ukraine. And so this isn't the time to shift him. But I do believe that the Conservative Party across the Conservative Party believe that when the time is right, we will need to look at who takes us into the next election. Boris may do all he promised us on Monday, sort number 10 out, sort the way the government works out, connect it to the parliamentary party. If he does that, he probably can, but I doubt that we'll see enough progress.
I think the issue is, though, you're right to say that the country faces some serious challenges at this moment. Absolutely, we do. But what Tobias Ellwood is saying is that he no longer believes that Boris Johnson has the credibility and the authority to lead Britain through those difficult months that we have ahead. And he would prefer, yes, there would be some turmoil in a leadership contest, but that's preferable to seeing Boris Johnson continue in this chaotic way. And I think that's the conclusion that more and more of your colleagues are now reaching. And unfortunately, I think that's where the country is as well. and that they no longer have confidence that Boris Johnson can lead us through what is, as you're right to point out, quite a difficult period.
The police may finish this all for us with their investigation. But actually, when you look at Boris, he stands up, says get the booster, and people go and get the booster. With Ukraine, he's definitely bringing the world's leaders together to get really significant and severe sanctions. We'll be voting on that in Parliament in the near future.
But he didn't have time to
he can
speak to Vladimir Putin because he was dealing with something about parties in number 10. So, that's the sort of thing that is really quite corrosive of someone's authority.
Well, the question is where this information comes from. Is it how much of it's true and how much it is just
he knows. He could tell us, couldn't he?
I hate to interrupt.
But you're going to. It's your job. Yeah.
Jenny, isn't it potentially problematic if Boris Johnson does go? I mean, the Labour Party has been saying, we want him to go, we want him to go. Yeah. Actually, the Conservative Party could be completely revitalised with a new leader, a fresh start, and you'd be back on the back foot if all the problems that have been associated with Boris Johnson, only in recent months, notwithstanding all the things that you have said that he has achieved, if those problems go along with Boris Johnson, then the Conservatives back on track, and that's a problem for you.
Well, I mean, in my point of view, Tories are Tories, aren't they? But as well as that, it's fine to look at this from a what's in the best interest of the Labour Party perspective. I'm not doing that, and neither's Keir Starmer. It needs to be what's in the country's best interests, and at the moment, with the best will in the world, I just do not see that having the country led by somebody with so little credibility and authority left because of his own actions and his inability to be open and truthful about them, that is not in the United Kingdom's best interests. And I just think we've got to the stage now where he does need to go.
We are going to cross live as soon as the Prime Minister gets on his feet, but I'm interested in what you would be asking today if you were in there, Derek.
Me? Well, interesting, I'll be asking something completely different. So I talked about integration of health and social care. Social care is the greatest thing facing my constituents in terms of pressure on hospitals, ambulances parked outside, and people not being treated with integrity and decency in their older age in particular. And so actually what I want to hear from the Prime Minister is, if he wants to integrate health and social care, will social care be treated exactly as it would be if you have a health problem? And will there be any difference? And will we treat care workers exactly as we treat them, as we treat a healthcare assistant, for example, working in a hospital, in terms of pay conditions, career opportunities, etc.? If we can get that right, actually really change the outcomes for lots and lots of people who are in our families, who we love and care about.
Interesting. Jenny, you have been elevated to the House of Lords. You and I got elected at
the
same time, so
yes.
You wouldn't be able to ask a question of the Prime Minister from the upper chamber, but let's imagine you're back there.
God, what a thought.
What would you ask?
I actually really like Derek's question,
it was,
because, for the sake of not just saying what he said, I would just like to ask why it's taking this 400-page document today to tell my kids and my friends' kids and my, the people in the North East that their kids are going to get less investment in their education than they had previously.
OK. Do you agree with Jenny?
It's a fact.
It's an interpretation, isn't it?
No, it's just a fact,
It's tough, isn't it, for Conservative MPs, when there's a Conservative government, to frame the question correctly, because you can be accused of saying, oh, you're just asking a sort of Crawley question.
Right, OK.
But also, you don't want to give your own party leader too much of a difficult time, but at the same time, you want to be seen to hold them accountable. It's hard to get that balance. Jenny and I never knew about that.
No, we don't know what that's like.
We never had that dilemma.
There's lots of would you agree with me's going on.
Yeah, maybe I don't ask those questions. But the test for my constituents is how it really changes their lived experience. And so social care is one that they don't really care about gatherings of number 10. They care about, will their gran or granddad or mum or dad really be cared for in old age? That's what people really care about.
And I think the Speaker is about to introduce Prime Minister's question time. Shall we go live to the chamber to have a listen? Let's go live to the House of Commons for Prime Minister's question time, if we may. We'll go there as soon as the Speaker has finished outlining today's business. Let's talk about cost of living. I'm imagining that is a big area in your constituency.
Yeah.
Big issue in your constituency. How do you respond to it when you're going to put people's taxes up in April?
Well, that's a really good question, because I've just banged on about social care and you can't do it unless you pay for it. And so at the moment, the Chancellor might feel, and it probably is the right thing, to just delay it for a year, the national insurance hike. But if we can find some other way to support the families that really need help with the cost of living, particularly pensioners who have saved up for even small private pensions that are finding with low interest rates and the cost of living is just not meeting the need. But if we can do that, then probably we need to maintain that national insurance increase to ensure we do that.
The Prime Minister's on his feet. Forgive me.
Become the first British monarch to celebrate a platinum jubilee. While it is a moment for national celebration, it will be a day of mixed emotions for Her Majesty, as, of course, the day also marks 70 years since the death of her beloved father, George VI. I know that the whole House will want to join me in thanking Her Majesty for her tireless service. We look forward to celebrating her historic reign with a series of national events in June. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Mr. McVeigh.
On Monday, the Secretary of State for Health said mandatory vaccinations would be subject to a consultation. So can the Prime Minister make it clear, unequivocally, no ifs, no buts, no qualifications, that mandatory vaccinations for NHS staff will be abandoned? Will he also make it clear that is true for care workers as well, many of whom have already lost their jobs? So what support will the government be giving to get those care workers back into the care sector, and will those who've lost their jobs get compensation?
Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend very much for her thoughtful work on this. I want to stress that vaccines remain our best line of defence, and I do think that NHS staff and all those who work in the care sector have a professional responsibility to get vaccinated, Mr. Speaker. But as my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, told the House on Monday, given the difference between Omicron and Delta, it is right, and she is right, that we revisit the balance of risks and opportunities, Mr. Speaker. The Health Secretary has said we'll launch a consultation, and subject to the responses and the will of this House, Mr. Speaker, the government will revoke the regulations.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Keir Starmer.
I just want to say to the members opposite, theirs is the party of Winston Churchill. Our party stood together as we defeated fascism in Europe. Now their leader stands in the House of Commons parroting the conspiracy theories of violent fascists to try and score cheap political points. He knows exactly what he is doing. It's time to restore some dignity. Mr. Speaker, one of the most absurd claims made on behalf of Operation Save Big Dog is the Prime Minister and the Chancellor writing in the Sunday Times that they are the tax-cutting Conservatives. Why do these alleged tax cutters keep raising taxes on working people?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on his first point, I don't want to make heavy weather of this, but I am informed that in 2013, the right honourable gentleman apologised and took full responsibility for what had happened on his watch, and I think, Mr. Speaker, that was the right thing to do. And Mr. Speaker, on what we're doing to tackle cost of living and taxation, Mr. Speaker, our COVID recovery plan is absolutely vital in helping people with the cost of living, lifting up universal credit payments, Mr. Speaker, by cutting the tax that people effectively pay, lifting the living wage, Mr. Speaker, helping councils with another £500 million for those who are facing particular hardship, Mr. Speaker. But what we're also doing, and this is absolutely vital, is increasing the number of high-wage, high-skill jobs in this country. 420,000 more on the payroll than there were before the pandemic began, because we've had the fastest exit from COVID of any European economy, Mr. Speaker, because we had the fastest vaccine and booster rollout.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just the national insurance rise. Thresholds for income tax frozen, a stealth tax on working people. The threshold for tuition fees frozen. a stealth tax on working people. Local authorities forced to increase council tax, a stealth tax on working people. You can be as stealthy as you like, but you can't hide reality. We have the highest tax burden for 70 years during the middle of an inflation crisis. So I ask the Prime Minister again, why do he and the Chancellor keep raising taxes on working people?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we are doing is helping people with the cost of living, cutting taxes for those on universal credit, Mr. Speaker, as I have said. Helping people with the cost of their fuel, Mr. Speaker, with the cold weather payments, the warm homes payments, Mr. Speaker, doing all the things that this country would expect, lifting the living wage, which this party, Mr. Speaker, introduced. This party, this government has increased by the record amount, Mr. Speaker. And above all, the most important thing that we are doing is helping people into work. 500,000 people off welfare into work under our Way to Work scheme. More people in work now than before the pandemic began, and that is the record of this government. Labour, never forget, Mr. Speaker, there's never been a Labour government that left office with unemployment lower than when they entered. Check that out, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Lots of words, lots of bluster, no answers. Word of warning. Word of warning, Prime Minister. That's not going to work with the police. I'll tell him why they're putting taxes up. Low growth. In the decade of Tory government before the pandemic, growth slumped. It was much, much weaker than under the last Labour government. If the Tories matched our record on growth, we would have £30 billion more to spend on public services without having to raise a single tax. Mr. Speaker, surely even this Prime Minister doesn't need someone else to tell him that he and the Chancellor are having to raise taxes because the Tories failed to grow the economy over a decade.
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, I think everybody in this country can see that we've been through the biggest pandemic since for 100 years, that we've looked after the people of this country to the tune of £400 billion, that we've put into furlough and all the other schemes, 11.7 million people protected. Everybody knows the cost of that, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, in spite of all the difficulties that we have faced, we have now got the fastest growth in the G7. Absolutely true. We've got youth unemployment. We've got youth unemployment at a record low, Mr. Speaker. We've got 3 times as much tech investment coming into this country as there is in France, twice as much as there is in Germany. Yes, that's absolutely true, Mr. Speaker. And never forget, if you want to know about Labour economics, never forget the last time they were in office, Mr. Speaker, when they were finally booted out, they left a note saying there's no money left. That's the way they run the country, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the UK...
Some people won't be getting more because they won't be here to hear it, so Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the UK has suffered the worst economic crisis in the G7. The Prime Minister has more chance of persuading the public that he didn't hold any parties than he has of persuading them that the economy is booming. High taxes are not just the result of low growth. Under this government, we've seen a pandemic of waste and fraud. From the Prime Minister's yacht to government contracts for mates of ministers, they've treated taxpayers as an ATM machine for their mates and their lifestyles. Now we find, Mr. Speaker, they've written off £8.7 billion on PPA, and the Chancellor's writing off £4.3 billion in fraud. That's enough to cover the tax hike he's inflicting on working people. So why did this government block the National Crime Agency from investigating all the billions they lost to fraud?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course we despise fraud and those who steal from the taxpayer, and that's why we've already recovered £743 million in lost furlough money, Mr. Speaker, £2.2 billion that was stolen in bounce-back loans, and we will go on. But I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I am proud of what this government and this country did in securing record quantities of PPE and record time, Mr. Speaker, in furloughing and looking after the entirety of British business and society in the way that we did, Mr. Speaker. And once again, Captain Hindsight comes to this House and attacks the government for doing exactly what he urged us to do 18 months ago. Mr. Speaker, it so happens that I found a letter. I've been rustling in my notes, Mr. Speaker, and I found a letter which I will place for your convenience in the House, in the library of the House, Mr. Speaker, from the Shadow Chancellor to my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Deluxe, suggesting that we could secure PPE supplies. This is on April the 22nd, 2020. Secure PPE supplies from from a theatrical costumier, and that we could get ventilators from a professional football agent, Mr. Speaker. No wonder under Labour, fraud was running at £21 billion per year, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud of what this government did to secure PPE, and I'm proud of the way we protected this country.
Keir Starmer. Who wants to be the first to leave? Please put your hand up, because I'm going to pick one of you. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, he's going to need it in the next few weeks. Waste and low growth explain why we have high taxes, but they don't explain why it's always working people that are asked to pay more. Yesterday, he ordered his troops not to support a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. As a result, the country is missing out on over £1 billion we could have used to cut taxes on energy bills for working people. Today, he's ordering his troops to vote for tax cuts for banks. As a result, the country is missing out on another £1 billion we could have spent cutting taxes for working people. Why are the Chancellor and the Prime Minister protecting oil companies and bank profits while putting taxes up on working people?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's just get to the heart of what this is all about. This is all about dealing with the consequences of the biggest pandemic this country has seen, with an unprecedented economic crisis in which the state had to come forward and look after the people of this country to the tune of £408 billion. But everybody can see the fiscal impacts of that. Shall I tell you what this government and this country is voting for and what we're doing? We're investing now in 45,000 more NHS workers, more people in our NHS this year than there were last year. 10,000 more nurses, 10,900 more nurses, about 5,000 more doctors, 9 million more scans, 100 community diagnostics hubs to help people to get the scans and treatment they need. And the incredible thing, the lamentable thing is that the party opposite, the party of Nye Bevan, Mr. Speaker, voted against those funds, voted against that investment, and they would have made our COVID recovery impossible.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, for all the bluster, the truth is the Conservative Party are the party of high taxes because they're the party of low growth. They are the party of high taxes because they're the party of eye-watering waste. Mr. Speaker, we know this Prime Minister has no respect for decency or honesty. I can take it when it's aimed at me, but I won't accept it when he gaslights the British public, writing absurd articles about cutting taxes at a time when he's squeezing working people to the pips. Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that he and his Chancellor are the Tory Thelma and Louise, hand in hand, as they drive the country off the cliff and into the abyss of low growth and tax?
Mr. Gullis, I think you've been trailed for long enough and you don't want to be trailed anymore. And that is the last comment I have, or otherwise I will ring your mother. Keir Starmer.
that he and the Chancellor, the Tory Thelma and Louise, hand in hand as they drive the country off the cliff and into the abyss of low growth and high tax.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the right honourable gentleman is Dick Dastardly and Muttley. Both of them pulling in different directions. We know they have different views, Mr. Speaker. We are getting on with the job, Mr. Speaker. And just in the last few days, and of course, I think it's absolutely extraordinary that they've done nothing to support our COVID recovery plan. They've voted against our plans to support the NHS. But what we're doing, just in the last few days, while he's been fixated on the issues that he's absolutely determined to escalate, what we've done, we've opened free ports across the country just in the last few days. We're getting 500,000 people off welfare into work with our Way to Work plan. In just a few short minutes, Mr. Speaker, I hope he will hang around, because he will hear my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, deliver the long-awaited Levelling Up white paper, full of good stuff, including 55 education investment areas across our country. A wonderful moral and economic mission to level up and give opportunity across the whole country. A fantastic vision for this country, Mr. Speaker. They have nothing of the kind to offer the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, while we are getting on with coming out of COVID with the fastest economic recovery in the G7, the fastest. He would have kept us in lockdown, Mr. Speaker. We're fixing the NHS and social care when they voted against it, and they have no plan. And we are, well, Mr. Speaker, we are building a coalition. We are building a coalition.
Just a minute. Prime Minister, I'm this way, not that way. Maybe Specsavers might be the answer to see where I am. And can I just say, Dame Caroline Dinage is desperate to get the next question to you. Dame Caroline Dinage.
I'd like to first of all give my condolences to the Right Honourable Member for Camberwell and Peckham and say how good it is to see her back in her place. Mr. Speaker, Sophie Farrell was just 10 years old when she died in September. Childhood cancer is often described as rare, yet cancer is the biggest killer of children under 14. Sophie's GP failed to diagnose her cancer, and it was only when she went to A&E that they discovered the tumour in her little body that was 12 centimetres long. So, Mr. Speaker, on World Cancer Day on Friday, I would like to ask the Prime Minister to please advocate for more and better training for general practice to identify cancer in children.
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable. I'm very sorry to hear of Sophie's case, and my thoughts are with her family and her friends. And she's right that research is crucial in tackling childhood cancers. That's why we're investing in more research. But it's also vital that we do tests and diagnostic scans and screens early enough. And that's why it's also important that NICE has not only updated its guidance on referring childhood cancers in February February last year, but we're investing in 100 new diagnostic centres in community hubs.
I now come to the Leader of the SNP.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure that you and the rest of the House will want to join me in celebrating and supporting World Cancer Day. Mr. Speaker, just in relation to your earlier statement, I have a difficulty reconciling the Prime Minister's version of events with other evidence, and as you know, I have a duty to reflect and represent the deep, deep public anger with the Prime Minister. That said, Mr. Speaker, I respect the absolute impartiality that you take in your role, and I want to set on the record that I respect both you and the authority of the Chair. Mr. Speaker, this morning the Telegraph newspaper revealed that the Prime Minister attended a party in his flat on the 13th of November 2020. The Prime Minister previously told the House that no party took place. The police are now investigating this party, and we face a very real prospect of a sitting Prime Minister being questioned under caution and being fined in office. And if he is questioned, Mr. Speaker, he must go. If he's fined, he must resign. Mr. Speaker, you'll agree that the House should not be treated with contempt. So can the Prime Minister... here we go again. So can the Prime Minister update the House on his whereabouts on the evening of the 13th of November? Surely, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't need to wait for an investigation to tell us exactly where he was.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, here we go again, says the right honourable gentleman opposite, and I must say those are entirely my feelings. He asked exactly the same questions as I recall in the chamber a few days ago. He knows, Mr. Speaker, that the process must go on, but I can tell him what's been going on in Downing Street, Mr. Speaker. In November and throughout, we've been delivering the fastest vaccine and booster rollout anywhere in Europe. We've been getting people back into work, Mr. Speaker. We've been getting people back into work, Mr. Speaker, and we've been helping to bring the West together to defy what I think is completely unacceptable threats and intimidation from the Putin regime against Ukraine. And that's what we've been doing.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, that was a disgraceful response. And I have to say to the Prime Minister, he should read the room and he should see some of the faces on his colleagues' faces. He has lost it. Mr. Speaker, we've now reached the ridiculous scenario of a Prime Minister who can't even tell us where he was. He lives in a world where he thinks everything is owed to him, and he never pauses to think what he owes to the public. The Prime Minister is now a dangerous distraction at home and a running joke on the international stage. What does it tell the Prime Minister and the public that in the morning that he has returned from Ukraine, the chair of the Defence Select Committee has submitted a letter of no confidence in him?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it tells me that it is more vital than ever for the government of this country to get on with the job, deliver our COVID recovery plan, and that is what we are doing.
Virginia Crosby.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to say thank you to the Prime Minister for visiting my Unismore constituency, where he saw firsthand the enormous beneficial impact a new nuclear plant will know it could have if built on Anglesey. Nuclear power must play a role if we are to meet our carbon and net zero commitments, level up and combat rising energy prices. Does my right honourable friend agree that the rapid deployment of nuclear technology must be a priority for this government? And if so, will my right honourable friend commit to financing a nuclear plant at the Wilver site this Parliament?
Well, it was a great joy to visit my honourable friend's constituency, where I believe she is known as Atomic Kitten, or so she informed me, Mr. Speaker, and she outlined in great detail her plans for Wilfer. It's a fantastic vision, a fantastic site, and it remains a very interesting and attractive prospect for new nuclear power.
Colin Eastman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Working families in Northern Ireland have lost £1,000 from their universal credit. Their national insurance has been put up by this government, and their energy bills are going through the roof. He's very fond of telling us that we're all in this together. Isn't it the truth, Mr. Speaker, that this Prime Minister has only ever been in it for himself and his rich mates?
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm in it to serve my country and the entire United Kingdom. And I'm also proud that we've had the biggest investment in Northern Ireland since devolution began, and we've cut taxation on universal credit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. South Western Railway has totally cut off Dorset, Somerset, most of Wiltshire and Devon from its direct rail services to London, as well as slashing our service in half, most of which is totally unnecessary. Will my right honourable friends support me and my neighbouring colleagues in getting direct services back to West Dorset and having a timetable that's fit for our region?
Prime Minister.
I want to thank my honourable friend very much for his question, and he knows whereof he speaks. He's an expert in this subject, Mr. Speaker, and he's lobbied very effectively for his constituents and reflected their frustrations. And I'm told that the timetable is expected to return to December 2021 levels from Saturday, the 19th of February.
Alex Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A cold and leaky house. She has seen her bills already go up from £100 to £170 a month. The government have failed to insulate her house and failed to control her fuel bills. Bribing people with their own money is no plan. The Prime Minister has no plan to cut VAT, no plan to get the oil and gas industry to contribute. Another constituent who voted for the Prime Minister went further and called him despicable. What use is a Prime Minister who has no plan for families struggling with the cost of living and has lost the trust of the people of this country?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he talks about cutting VAT. I wonder whether he voted for Brexit and our ability to cut VAT. Perhaps he could indicate. Perhaps he could indicate, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing, which we delivered, Mr. Speaker, and whose anniversary we celebrated on Monday. And what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is, and I sympathise very much with his constituent, and I understand the pressures that people are facing on the cost of living. But what we've got to do is invest in and then protect them, and we're putting £12 billion worth of support and financial help for families in hardship this year, and it's absolutely vital after the pandemic. But the most important thing is to have a jobs-led economic recovery. And in case I failed to make myself clear before you wound me up, Mr. Speaker, that's why we have the fastest economic growth in the G7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Greater Manchester Mayoral Clean Air Zone scheme, effectively a congestion charge affecting all 500 square miles of Greater Manchester, including my constituents in Lee, is a job-destroying tax on ordinary working
Burnham's fault.
We all want clean air, but the model proposed by Mayor Burnham is unworkable and economically devastating. With charges of £60 per day per lorry driver. Taxis, white van men, even buses will be caught by it. Will the PM intervene to prevent Mayor Burnham from inflicting this disastrous Labour scheme on Greater Manchester?
I know from my own experience how vital it is when you're trying to clean up air in a great city that you do not unjustly penalise business, and particularly small businesses. And it's become clear that the scheme proposed by the Labour Mayor in Manchester is completely unworkable, will do more damage to businesses and residents in Manchester. So we must find an alternative, Mr. Speaker, that doesn't punish local residents. And my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for the Environment, will be saying more about this in the coming days.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the a party or hosting a party during lockdown, will he inform the House and will he resign?
Yes. Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, of course I will comply with the law, but I've got to wait for the process to be concluded.
Ian Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Elected, my fabulous constituency of Blythe Valley is really seeing the green shoots of prosperity. Government support is a green revolution in Blythe Valley. However, with such growth, the increased congestion on our roads, we are in desperate need of upgrades to the road infrastructure. Would my right honourable friend please meet with me to discuss the urgent problem and help Blythe Valley out of the ever-increasing traffic jam? Thank you.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is the best champion that Blythe could possibly have. And he does a quite amazing job. And I want to thank him in particular, Mr. Speaker, for helping to secure the British Volt Gigafactory in Blythe. Absolutely amazing investment. And I understand that, of course, growth and prosperity bring their challenges when it comes to congestion on our roads. We have to tackle that. We're working with the Council on a bid for the Blythe Relief Road, and I'll make sure that my honourable friend gets a meeting with the Transport Secretary to discuss it further.
Rachel Bascom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wrong choices. While he's been living it up, many of my constituents are living on the breadline as food, energy and taxes shoot up. In York, the rent prices are the highest now in the north and some of the highest in the country. And York is now in the top 10 places in the country where there is a cost of living crisis, pushing my constituents further into poverty and debt. So when is he going to stop protecting himself and start protecting my constituents?
So, Mr. Speaker, one of the first things I did when I became Prime Minister was to ensure that we looked after people on low incomes by increasing local housing allowance, Mr. Speaker, by increasing the living wage, not once but twice, and by record amounts, Mr. Speaker, and of course by doing what we've now done with universal credit. But the most important, I really think the House needs to get this, but the most important thing about the UK economy right now is that we have a strong jobs-led recovery, and that is what is going to drive up wages and drive up productivity and drive up growth, and that is what this government is delivering.
So Desmond Swain.
Will he brief us on his visit to Ukraine?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, very briefly, Mr. Speaker, I can tell the House that the mission was to, as I hope everybody will support, was to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, for the House, for our country to show that we stand with the people of Ukraine and we stand for the sovereign and territorial integrity of Ukraine at a very difficult time, because there are on the borders of Ukraine, as everybody knows, about 125,000 Russian troops massing. The situation is very perilous. And the job of the UK is to lead the West in bringing together the most important countries in creating a package of economic sanctions that will deter President Putin from what I believe would be a disastrous miscalculation, and also to strengthen our support for the Ukrainian people and indeed the Ukrainian army. And we're doing that. We're supplying lethal but defensive weaponry as well as training to the Ukrainians. And that is greatly appreciated. But I must say that the situation remains risky, Mr. Speaker, and it is vital that diplomacy finds a way forward.
Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, on a related issue, after the publication of the Russia report, the Prime Minister claimed tackling illicit finance and driving dirty. His warnings to Mr. Putin of late would surely have carried more bite if he'd actually used the 18 months since publication of the Russia report to legislate for an economic crime act to stop the flow of dirty money for Russia. Why hasn't he prioritised this issue of national security?
Mr. Speaker, contrary to some of the myths that are peddled, this government has come down very hard on dirty money from Russia and everywhere else. That's why we brought in the unexplained wealth orders and indeed China, Mr. Speaker, which they might like to consider. That's why we have sanctions on Russia following what they did in Crimea in 2014. We have Magnitsky sanctions on everybody involved in the poisoning of Alexei Navalny. And to his point, Mr. Speaker, we are bringing forward the economic crime bill so that it will take place, it will be voted on in the third session of this Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the And despite there being a global pandemic in the 2 years since, over 70 free trade agreements have been signed. However, as we recover, there are many more opportunities that can be realised. So will the Prime Minister commit to appointing a minister responsible for realising those Brexit freedoms and benefits that will boost all of our constituencies?
Mr. Speaker, you can hear from the chuntering opposite that they still want to take this thing back. They still want to cancel Brexit, Mr. Speaker. But it was thanks to Brexit very largely that we had the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, Mr. Speaker, and we've been able to deliver our free ports, Mr. Speaker, and we've been able to do 60 or 70 free trade deals around the world. And yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to anticipate any decisions I may make about the government, but I certainly think it would be a good idea to have a minister driving that post-Brexit agenda.
Thank you. Let's just recap, Mr. Speaker. Before we were told we must wait for the Sue Gray report, then we were told we must wait for the police investigation to conclude. There was no party. And then if there was a party, I wasn't there then. Well, if there was a party, then all rules were followed. But no one, Prime Minister, believes you. And if any of the above were true, why did Allegra Stratton have to resign?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I explained that sad matter on the floor of the House, and nobody wanted Allegra to resign, and I was very sad that she did.
Simon Jupp.
Thank you.
My constituent, Ginty Sheeran from Exmouth, has launched a campaign to get a dedicated menopause clinic in Devon. Women in East Devon currently face a 120-mile round trip to get to the nearest specialist menopause clinic. It's not good enough, is it?
No.
Will my right honourable friend outline what steps the government is taking to improve access to menopause services in Devon and the South West?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this very important campaign, and we are committed to improving menopause care so that all women can have access to the support they need and to manage the symptoms. Menopause will be a priority within our women's health strategy, and we're committed to establishing a UK-wide menopause task force, Mr. Speaker.
Dame Angela Riedel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister needs a Metropolitan Police inquiry to tell him whether he attended a party on the 13th of November in his own Downing Street flat, why should we believe that he's a fit and proper person to have his hand on the button of our independent nuclear deterrent?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hesitate to remind the right honourable lady, but she campaigned actively to install a Prime Minister who wanted to get rid of our nuclear deterrent altogether.
Mark Isworth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister, the Government and our NHS have done an amazing job with the vaccine rollout, making it a resounding success. Would my right honourable friend join me in thanking the wonderful NHS workers, volunteers and pharmacies who have worked so hard to help make this possible in Dewsbury, Mirfield, Kirkburn and Denby Dale?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, who does a fantastic job of representing his communities, and I want to thank all of them, Mr. Speaker, everybody involved in the rollout in Dewsbury, in Mirfield, in Kirkburton and in Denby Dale, Mr. Speaker, because it was an extraordinary national effort, and anybody who visited a vaccine centre will know that feeling of pride in what was happening, that feeling of energy in a collective effort to make our society and our country literally healthier day by day. And I thank all of them, Mr. Speaker, from the bottom of my heart.
That's the end of PMQs. So those who wish to leave, please do so quietly and quickly.
Is over, and with me now to go through how it went are my fantastic panel: Baroness Jenny Chapman, Shadow Minister at the Cabinet Office, and Derek Thomas, Conservative MP for West Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. I hope I got it right that time, Derek. Right, OK, let's look at the leader's strongest lines there. Derek, the argument that Keir Starmer was prosecuting was that we have the highest tax burden under a Conservative government for 70 years. Does that make you feel uncomfortable as a Conservative when a Labour leader prosecutes that line?
Well, it makes me uncomfortable, full stop, because absolutely is what we don't believe in. But Rishi and the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have made it clear to us that they'll do everything they can to get back on top of, to drive taxes down and drive up wages as soon as we possibly can. I mean, it is true that we threw a huge amount of money, fundamental amounts of money, as much as Second World War, I think, tackling COVID. Now, we might have regretted some of that, and some of it probably wasn't spent that well. But we are in that situation now. We've got to get out of it. And we do need to keep public services working. And what we don't want is a return to austerity where we actually strip public services that we so badly need in our constituency of cash to operate. So I don't want to tolerate high taxes. We've got to get on top of it quickly. We need to find a way of raising money as much as possible from the right people. But so actually, Rishi and Boris both have something to prove to us MPs that they can do this, they can deliver.
OK. And Jenny, the Prime Minister's strongest line in response was that help is on the way when it comes to energy bills, that they have lifted the living wage to a record amount, that they're getting people back into work, that their record stands for itself.
I mean, they just need to get out there into the real world and speak to real people. I mean, if you go shopping at the moment, you see the things that people buy, like just simple things like pasta, milk, bread, you know, all of those things. The level, the increases in price of those items is just, you know, a packet of pasta that was 35 pence is now 80 pence, things like that. It's having a real impact. What's happening with the cost of fuel, with energy prices, people's bills going up. Their pay has not kept pace with that, and it's really, really hurting. And help is on its way, great, but let's see it, because, you know, it's no good it coming in 6 months, a year. People need it now.
Jenna, the potential problem with the argument that Labour's prosecuting is that it was exactly the same argument made by Ed Miliband between 2010 and 2015. Labour enjoyed a poll lead for much of that time, and then David Cameron delivered the first Conservative majority government since 1992. Have we been here before? It didn't work out so well for Labour last time this argument was prosecuted.
I think it is different now. I mean, it's a fair challenge, but it is different now because, you know, I remember those years too, and I remember a bit too much confidence on the Labour side at that time. What you see now is the Labour Party is very respectful of the lead that it now enjoys, and it knows that it doesn't keep that and it doesn't deliver at the election unless it gives more detail to people, unless we continue to grow people's trust in us, particularly on the economy. And it was really quite startling to see for the first time I can remember the Labour Party ahead in terms of people's trust in us in handling the economy. And I think that's largely down to Rachel Reeves and the work that she's doing. I think, you know, we cannot take anything for granted, and the Labour Party isn't doing that. Keir and Rachel won't do that. So it is different. I can see why you asked the question from where we are at the moment, but we need to continue to gain people's trust, and there's no complacency in the Labour Party about that at all.
Derek, does it worry you that Labour now have a lead on the economy, on economic competence?
It doesn't worry me because I think we've seen it through the midterm of most parliaments.
Well, I've not seen that before, to be fair, not on the economy.
On that. But the thing that I think that worried us, the Conservative backbench MPs, was about 4 or 5 weeks ago, the Labour Party and Sir Keir Starmer looked like a government in waiting, but actually, the way that things have evolved in the last 3 or 4 weeks, while they've been triumphant in their attacks on the Prime Minister, I think that's fallen away. I don't think the opposition is as convincing as a government in waiting as they were just over Christmas time. So I think there's some work to be done with the Labour Party on that one. But actually, what people really vote, they want to be sure that when things matter, that the government is robust and can get on with things and get things done. And the Prime Minister has demonstrated he can do that. The government have demonstrated they can do that. And they've got a couple of years at least to really address some of these challenges that people face today before we actually have to make a decision. So I think there's an opportunity for us to recover, and there's an opportunity for us to demonstrate that on the things that really matter to people, social care, as I said, the economy, people's wages, the cost of living, that actually there is things that we can achieve in all those areas. And I think that Sir Keir Starmer is absolutely not guaranteed to be the next Prime Minister.
No, I mean, no one's saying he is guaranteed. I mean, I'm not saying there's a guarantee. At the end of the day, you know, it's up to the people of this country, and we've got to make our case. But we've got time to do that. We're making really good progress, and we're getting a warm reception in the places where we need to. So, you know, let's just keep putting our best foot forward, and the Labour Party just needs to keep on doing what it's doing. And I think we can be confident, but absolutely not complacent at all.
Derek, the Prime Minister addressed Conservative MPs on Monday evening. Were you at that
yeah,
meeting?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
And did he reassure you about the future? Did he lighten the mood amongst some Tory MPs? Some are incredibly loyal to him. Some have questions. How did you read that meeting?
Well, I think the criticism that we've had probably of Boris for the whole time, including actually maybe when he was London Mayor, is that he is definitely a competent individual and leader and can rally and can obviously deliver results when it comes to polling stations. But he does have a bit of a problem in he needs the right people around him to really deliver what we need. And I think number 10 has been weak in that regard, and his leadership made him number 10. And so what he made, actually there's two things that were really clear on Monday night that we want to see come to fruition, if you like. Firstly, he genuinely came across as really upset about what had been able to take place at number 10, what had happened under his leadership, if you like, the things that are being investigated, as we know, when our constituents were not seeing loved ones when they really needed to. I didn't see a mother-in-law for a long time, and now looking back, it was ludicrous, so we asked people to do that. But he really was upset about that, and I think that was positive to see, and I think it might be the making of him, this horrendous situation he's in right now. I don't want to at all undo the challenge he's facing and how he let people down. But the other thing was how he just wants to get back to his sorting out the establishment and sorting out all the stuff that stops things happening. And I think number 10, bizarrely, what is nearly a government department-sized operation, gets in the way of most of what we want to try and do. So he's saying he's going to sort that out. So I think he's been given time by me and other backbench MPs to sort it out and actually demonstrate that he can do that and that we're not just going to be here in 2 months' time.
We read about Boris's operation, sort of calculating and listing the Tory MPs in various categories, those that are on the danger list or have already submitted a letter of no confidence, those who are absolutely loyal under all circumstances, and those who are wavering. I'm putting you down. I'm not running Boris's leadership protection campain, but I'm putting you down on the wavering list. Is that? Do you reckon?
Well, I can be really brief. So, as I said, I didn't support him in wanting to be the leader, and I spoke to him about it. We had a long conversation. It was mutually respectful, and actually, I've done a lot of work with him before when he was London Mayor, in some support of some businesses that I wanted to promote from Cornwall to London. Also, he had the G7 in my constituency, so I worked extremely closely with him for most of 2020, no parties, most of 2020, 21, and it was a really positive event in my constituency, and also I take very seriously the issues around environment and COP26 that I see as a triumph. So actually, he and I work closely together, and he's come to I think he came to my constituency 7 or 8 times while I've been an MP. So actually, personally, we get on extremely well. But at the end of the day, it's the things that matter to my constituents. I put myself forward, put my head above the parapet to become an MP because I care about West Cromwell. I grew up there. I absolutely want to make sure West Cromwell has the best opportunity and outcome possible. Okay. That's all I care about. And if Boris can deliver that, then fine. If not, let's find someone else.
We got there. We got there in the end, and that was very clear in the end. Jenny, I want to. It was a remark that you commented on while we were watching Prime Minister's Question Time, and I just want to ask or reflect on whether politics and Parliament is changing. And the reason I ask that is because a Conservative man, MP, raised the subject of the menopause. The Prime Minister responded by talking about the menopause. Is Parliament and politics finally moving into this century?
Oh my God, it needs to. I mean, I just think what's happened is thanks to largely Carolyn Harris, a Labour MP, but, friends across Parliament, they've made the menopause interesting, cool, something that everyone should be talking about. It's great to hear men standing up in Parliament and asking for better access for HRT for women. I read this morning that we might be able to get HRT over the counter. What a game changer that would be. And, shouldn't we be using our pharmacists an awful lot more because they can do more than they've been allowed to do previously? I think things are changing. They're changing fast. Education around the menopause is changing. So, yes, I'm really pleased to see that. It warmed my heart, and let's just see more of it.
Derek, is stuffy old politics, is it on the way out? Are we entering a new time of politics where people just talking how anybody outside of that chamber might talk about
I think that's what has changed. So in the last probably 10 or 15 years, maybe more recently, the candidates that get selected by all political parties are much more representative of their constituencies. That's how we win, and that's how we relate to people. So I think that's it. I think we just are ordinary people that are wanting to serve. We believe in public service, we want to serve, and we have to do it in a quite peculiar and interesting environment.
And lots of your MPs, new MPs, are working class, I would say. I would say that 2019 general election perhaps changed the class makeup, particularly in your party. It's long overdue, isn't it?
Well, I'm a Cornish mason. I build barns. That's what I did for a living, converted barns. And one of my colleagues was a postman. So absolutely, we just work in our communities, and we try and represent them.
We need more ordinary people in politics.
Oh my God, we do. We miss you, actually. Yeah.
I don't miss it, but I've really enjoyed chatting to you two. You've been brilliant. Thank you very much. Please come back again soon. And thanks for being so open and honest. You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria DiPiero. Join me again tomorrow at noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. He's live from Burnley. That's as part of our North West Week. But for now, I'm going to leave you with your weather. That was PMQs.
Hello again. There will be some bright spells, even some sunshine, mainly to the east of higher ground, but most places are cloudy today, and it will be damp in the northwest, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, because a warm front is moving through. It's pushing northeast, and within this warm front, areas of cloud and rain arrive from the Atlantic, but also relatively mild air coming in from the west. Having said that, it is fairly chilly for the Northern Isles ahead of the warm front, and there'll be a few showers at first here before more persistent rain and drizzle arrives later, and it stays damp for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, as well as northwest England and North Wales, particularly over higher ground. But there will be cloud breaks to the east of Wales, across southeast England and eastern England, and where we get some cloud breaks, 13 or even 14 Celsius is possible, so really quite mild for the time of year. And then this cloudy and damp zone spreads across the whole of the country overnight. So the cloud breaks tending to fill in somewhat, and because of the cloud and an increased breeze, well, it's going to be frost-free for everyone. Temperatures most places staying up at 7 or 8 Celsius. A mild start then to Thursday, but a dull and dreary start for many. Some persistent rain around western hills and coasts. But again, some cloud breaks will develop, especially for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, and feeling pleasant enough where that happens. But the breeze will pick up through the day. Gales in the north and west of Scotland, and some heavy rain arriving here later as temperatures drop away significantly behind this area of rain. This is a cold front, and it's going to spread its way southeastwards on Thursday night. Snow above 300 metres for Scotland as the cold front pushes through, and also for the Pennines, and some really quite lively winds associated with it, so gales around coasts and hills. Once that front clears through, colder air for Friday, mixture of sunny spells and showers, turning cloudy with rain in the north on Saturday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll come